Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at an absolutely unprecedented event from the summer of 2026. This was a moment where the veil between history and the supernatural didn't just thin out, it completely shattered. We're going to break down a highly documented anomaly where an ancient, almost forgotten occult myth literally crashed a modern seance. It's a wild case study on what actually happens when historical lore suddenly becomes a measurable physical reality.
And that brings us to the core question we're unraveling today. What happens when an ancient myth crashes a modern seance? The terrifying anomaly at the Weightman Mansion forced researchers to completely rewrite the rulebook. For decades, occult scholars just assumed certain ancient entities were purely metaphorical. Well, this event proved them dead wrong. And understanding how it went down fundamentally changes where we draw the line between myth and reality.
So let's set the scene. Summer 2026, the Weightman Mansion in Washington state. A gathering was held with one explicit purpose: to call upon the deceased spirit of the famed medium Madame Tatiana Lupensky. But as you probably know, Madame Lupensky was no ordinary medium. She possessed an immense amount of spiritual energy. And the records show it was actually the sheer magnitude of her power that acted like a massive beacon, triggering something else entirely. A manifestation literally unseen in the modern era. Now, the mechanical trigger for that beacon? Exactly 13 individuals. According to the source data, this wasn't just some random guest list. The combined spiritual energy of these 13 people, all attempting to reach the incredibly powerful Madame Lupensky, created an absolute perfect storm for an ancient entity to just step right through the door.
Which brings us to the legend of Zoethea, moving from grimoires to reality.
Just looking at her name perfectly illustrates her true identity. It's derived from the Greek root zoe, meaning the divine immortal spark of life, and thea, meaning goddess. For centuries, modern occult scholars completely dismissed Zoethea as just some poetic metaphor you'd find in crumbling, leather-bound grimoires. Out of the 13 people at the table that night, only 4 deep practitioners even recognized her name. She isn't just some localized ghost haunting a random hallway. She is the fundamental, ancient, cosmic backbone, the universal conduit bridging the physical realm and the afterlife. And at the Weightman Mansion, she showed up. Let's look at the physical and atmospheric effects, the actual arrival of the conduit. The sheer physical impact of her manifestation is seriously jarring. If you've ever seen a typical seance, you'd probably expect dark, lingering gloom, maybe some normal combustion smoke. But Zoethea, she arrives as this thick, luminescent, ethereal white mist. And the sources are incredibly specific here. It doesn't just float aimlessly. This white vapor creeps across the table with a fluid, deliberate, almost living intelligence. It's a highly active, totally visible physical phenomenon. The clinical data on this atmospheric escalation is absolutely mind-blowing. Her presence triggers immediate, extreme shifts in the room's environment. The temperature absolutely plummets. The air pressure drops so suddenly and so dramatically that the participants' ears actually pop, kind of like you're on a rapidly descending airplane. And the oxygen itself changes. It becomes crisp, icy, and heavily charged with static electricity. It literally turns the entire room into a freezing, sensory-overloaded vacuum. Next up, we have the domino possession mechanics, basically turning the room into a pressure cooker. So once that intense atmosphere is set, how does the possession actually work? The sequence is terrifyingly precise. First, the glowing white vapor floats directly to the host's face. Then, the mist forces ingress, flowing in a thick stream right through the mouth, nostrils, or parted lips. At that point, the host is temporarily possessed, acting as a vessel to speak these deeply buried truths. And then comes the most violent part. The mist exits. This acts as a massive domino handoff. It violently snaps the previous vessel out of their trance, leaving them shaken, exhausted, and just gasping for air, while the glowing vapor immediately snakes across the table to strike the very next target. Now, the really crucial point here is understanding her motive. Zoethea doesn't possess these individuals to destroy or corrupt them. Instead, she acts as a cosmic tuner. She systematically passes through all 13 participants, one by one, to build this massive, unprecedented reservoir of spiritual energy. By turning each person into a temporary vessel, totally distinct spirits are actually able to speak through them. This process actively unlocks deeply buried truths, forgotten memories, and ancient ancestral lore that would have otherwise been completely lost to time. There's a quote from the sources that perfectly captures the terrifying escalation of that night. The sequence builds not by a timer, but by sheer intensity. The emotional weight, the glow of the white vapor, and the physical pressure in the room compound exponentially. As Zoethea jumps from person to person, bouncing between all 13 participants, it creates an unbearable pressure cooker effect. It's not just about the time ticking by. It's the physical cold, the static, the absolute emotional exhaustion, and that blinding white vapor literally stacking on top of itself with every single host she uses. Which leaves us staring at the aftermath of the summer of 2026. We know the mechanics. We know the atmospheric data. We know exactly how the legendary goddess of seances bridged the physical realm and the afterlife inside that mansion. But it leaves us with one thrilling, lingering question. When the ultimate cosmic tuner opened the minds of those 13 exhausted, gasping vessels, what terrifying ancient truths did they actually bring back with them into the dark? Think about that for a while. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and remember to keep questioning what you think is just a myth.